Governance. Sometimes you're the Debbie Downer when you talk about governance, but it is not an either or when it comes to governance or speed. So let's tackle the governance part. Speed is rewarded in this industry, although you may pay a price for it later if you don't do it well. But you all say that governance and trust is the real differentiator. How so?
So first of all, I am not in a governance role. I am actually in a business value creation role. So I'll speak about it from that perspective. To me, trust is the most critical ingredient to speed. So how many times have we heard, oh, I built an agent on the weekend, it only took me 2 hours, look how great it is. And then 6 months later, or 9 months later, or 12 months later, it hasn't gone anywhere, or it's sitting in UAT, or it's been abandoned. And the reason is because there's no built-in trust. And by that I mean embedded and wherever possible, automated governance from the beginning with approved architecture patterns and cost optimization. These are the things that build trust. So we trust that agent to evaluate its own risk. We trust it to assess its own accuracy. We trust it to protect against adversaries built in. Like, to me, that's how we go fast. And so there's no waiting 6 months for something to happen because that has been built in from the time that we developed it. So to me, trust and speed are definitely one and the same.
Tyler?
Yeah, I'm also not particularly in a governance role, but I run a company where we help companies who are under regulations achieve reliable AI. And you know, the interesting thing about trust is that there's 175 AI regulations that are coming online. Some of them with very significant penalties for not meeting the expectations that are defined within them. And so if you're going to build an agent and you're going to put it out there and it's going to have exposure to customer or even sensitive information, you know, that agent has to be governed, almost self-governed in a way, to understand the nature of all those controls that have to be around it in order for you to trust it. And so that's why I fully agree that, you know, when you're building these agents, they have to have this sort of understanding of compliance and the control framework as it goes out. And if you do that up front, then you're going to be able to get it into production that much quicker.
One of our previous guests said that he thought that a lot of the issues that we're talking about, particularly when it comes to this, are something that CEOs need to understand, that people at the C-suite level need to understand. In your experience, do you think enough of them do understand?
Of course, the answer is no. First of all, if they understood yesterday, what day is it today? Tuesday. If they understood on Monday, then they're out of date on Tuesday.
That's
I mean,
true.
You know, I joke with our board. When I meet with the board, you have to submit the documents for the board 4 days before the meeting. Well, by then things have changed and moved on, and I'm presenting out of date information. So it is an ongoing. I mean, I find at Manulife, our CEO has leaned in incredibly well, and he has taken the responsibility to say, you know what, my job is to lead in AI, and that means I need to understand what's happening so that I can advise you and I can advise the board and I can ensure our stakeholders that we're approaching it this the right way. So there's definitely an interest in the education. I think that the onus is on us to continue to refresh that education and make it relevant and make it very timely.
What about your clients? How do you make them get it?
Oh, you know, most clients are still, trying to figure out what the full scope of these regulations are, right? And they're changing week to week. So this is how fast the pace of change has been. And so a lot of organizations, fortunately, not many of them have enforcement teeth yet. So they're mostly guidance, advisory, that sort of thing. Okay. So they're able to go into production, they're able to stay there safely, but they're trying to figure out how they're going to comply when the enforcement period comes along. And so they're using it as an iterative education process.
I want to talk about something that you said, Jodie, like someone's like, look what I built over the weekend, right? When does experimentation become a governance cost and reliability problem?
Well, so like we want experimentation, right? Experimentation, first of all, is a great employee engagement tool. It's a great way to help educate all of our colleagues on what AI is, what it's possible with. It becomes a cost when you have a whole bunch of things that, well, in my opinion, we have this discussion about, are we stifling innovation if we try and move people to common platforms and common components? And I say, well, innovation, by its very definition, has to be something new and novel. So if we're experimenting by building the same things that we've already built over and over and over again, I don't really see any business value in that. I see some engagement value in that. I don't see any business value in that. So you have to sort of separate, okay, if we're doing experimentation and encouraging employees to try their teeth at building agents, that's a good thing for people's learning and engagement and getting educated. But we need to think about experimentation toward delivering business value as we are building that experiment with all the approved components and all the built-in governance so that if that experiment goes well, boom, we're off to the races. There's no building something over here and then rethinking it later or leaving it languishing in UAT.
It's what I've heard you both say. You slow down to get it right so that you can go fast later. I know that you both subscribe to that. Is that right, Tyler?
Yeah, I mean, I think one way to think about this is, there are certain organizations that are getting far enough along where they're laying down a platform. And, and that's a non-zero amount of work. You have to lay down a platform, but what it's doing is it's giving you a set of standards for repeatability. It's giving you the sort of governance controls that you want to have in place. And so ultimately, once they start experimenting, they can do it at a much higher velocity. So that's the go slow to speed up.
Can I add one dimension to that,
sure.
Rochelle? The other dimension that we have to talk about, and I know this particular topic is about governance, but governance is sometimes used as an excuse for doing the right thing that we know we should be doing, because a lot of the regulations, not all, but a lot of the regulations are pretty common sense in my opinion. Cost is something that we have been overlooking for a lot of years, right?
Okay.
Because we've been building apps, and the cost of building apps is basically free from an infrastructure perspective. You move to the cloud, it's basically free. You don't really notice any cost increases. You can build good code or bad code, it doesn't matter. With AI, if you are not building in cost optimization up front, you're also going to dramatically increase the infrastructure spend. And I recently had a forecast from our infra team, and they told me that I should expect the cost of the infra for our programs, our AI programs, to go up by 3% per month. And I said, 3% per month for how long? And he said, what do you mean for how long?
Forever and ever.
And I said, well, then we're out of business. Like this is not a thing. But we haven't thought about embedding in good cost optimization. First of all, Python is not the most optimal way to build solutions that are that are infrastructure efficient. We send calls to OpenAI or Claude, whenever we need them. We don't think about the number of tokens we're using. We don't think about the concurrency rates. We just think, oh, I'll just throw some more PTUs or GPUs at it. So the other angle to what Tyler's talking about is you need to build in these cost optimizations too, because as we deliver more, and we have publicly talked about delivering $1 billion of value from AI at Manulife. In order to do that, we need to make sure we're doing it in a way that we can sustain the costs as well.
That was definitely worth adding. Let's work on some audience questions now, and then I'll come back here. Are trust and governance interchangeable, in your opinion?
I mean, I think, trust is, almost like a feeling that you have for it. Governance is the record of that.
That's a good way to put that.
Yeah, I would say trust is the thing I care about. Governance is somebody else's job.
Okay.
But I care about that person.
I want you to say that part. She says, but she cares about that person.
Yeah.
Okay? All right. I like this other question as well. What kinds of development environments are being provided to non-tech users to ensure they are creating secure apps to start versus having security holes all over?
Oh, this has nothing to do with reliable AI. This has a story about how we're running our own company here.
Okay.
And so we've gone through our own AI transformation, and we wanted everybody to be AI first. We actually have kind of a potential vision where people won't even bother to use the browser in a couple of years. That's how potent AI is. And so we wanted everybody, our sales, marketing, R&D, to be living within some sort of AI experience. In order to do that, we needed a way to distribute all of kind of our company intelligence all the way to everybody who's around. And they needed to have parameters under which they could work under. But we didn't want them to have to ask, like, hey, how do I get access to our HubSpot or our CRM system, or marketing system or our financial data? That just needed to be all kind of regulated. So we actually had to lay down, we gave them access to all the tools that they wanted, but then we had to lay down, basically our own platform with a bunch of technical MCP servers that were basically dictating our kind of company policies within that for all the sort of access to the system. But it was important that we did this as a centralized system where everybody could use whatever local client AI tool, and then we pushed our company intelligence down to them. And that's how we address that.
Okay. We're a little bit behind that. I mean, we're a large multinational insurance company. About 50% of our operations are in 12 countries in Asia. So I would say that not everybody at Manulife can develop secure apps. I would say that everybody at Manulife, 100% of our employees, do have AI tools that we rolled out to them in 2023, starting in 2023, because we do believe that everybody should be able to participate in the AI economy to build skills. I think we are still kind of delineating between what citizen users can develop and what our IT and AI specialists can develop. And for citizen users, they have access, if they want it, to Copilot Studio to build agents. So we put some guardrails around that says this isn't for our mission critical, this isn't for our medium or high risk use cases, but it is for things to make you and your team more productive. And so that's the way that we think about it.
We've had some panelists earlier who said that they were teaching it and they were helping you get certifications to know how to do X, Y, and Z. I mean, that certainly makes it not as scary and not as intimidating, if nothing else. Okay, let me see here. How about why does after the fact auditing not good enough when it comes to agentic systems, Tyler?
Yeah. So if you look at the EU AI Act, which comes online in August of this year. With a lot of enforcement. There are $35 million penalties for failure to comply with the EU AI Act. And when you break it down across its over 102 controls that it has, it basically boils down to two things that it requires you to do. One is that if that AI system is exposed to the outside world in any shape or form, you have to be able to explain any decision that it took. And just asking the LLM to give it a chain of thought is not sufficient on that explainability. So having an agent spit out a bunch of logs and records and sending it somewhere else is not going to be able to allow you to go back to your regulators and say, this is what happened, I can explain it, and I can prove it because it's a log, it's a copy of a copy. The second thing that it does is that it forces you to be able to contain any AI system that's misbehaving. So you have to have independent, real-time, the ability to interfere with a system that has gone rogue, however you define rogueness in this regard. And so in order to do that, that means whoever the agent operator is, I'm using this term as somebody who's responsible for kind of risk managing this AI system, they have to be able to inject themselves into the running system. And this is beyond human in the loop. This is agent interference or agent operator interference into the agent system itself. And so that comes directly from the regulations.
There's a simple business reason why you can't either, which is if you're building an AI agent that your customers are going to use to get information about the products and services that they already have subscribed to get information about their balances, to understand what they're, in the case of health insurance, to understand what diseases they're covered for, what medications they're covered for. And we touch on very sensitive topics when we talk about health insurance. So somebody might ask a question about accidental death and dismemberment, or somebody might ask a question about getting mental health services. If we cannot understand the answers to these questions in real time, audit them before those questions essentially go back, before the answers go back to the customer, then no amount of later on audit is going to fix that relationship or that error with the customer. And it doesn't even have to be that sensitive, but you see what I'm saying? Like, you know, left to their own devices, any AI that you buy would basically decline to answer a question about accidental death and dismemberment and would have a very stock answer on mental health, whereas in our business, we have very nuanced answers about these things. So if you don't have that built in to audit the answer before it goes back to the customer, then it's too late.
This other question, you kind of touched on it, Jodie, but I think this is an important one to ask again. As costs increase with AI adoption, how do you manage the rising infrastructure costs? How do you know if the AI is actually helping? I think that should be the theme of it all.
Yeah, so I'll say, like, our cost, you know, what I'm now terming our cost governance program, because we needed to. I want to get some statistics, so that's why I'm opening this, is basically 3 components. The first is we partnered with Akka. We partnered with Tyler's team to say, because he told me that he could optimize the cost of running our AI solutions, and I marginally believed him, and then we actually went live with, I believed him enough to sign the contract, and then we went live, and I'll just give you a couple statistics. So by moving from sort of custom running in Databricks AI solutions, one on what's called underwriting quick quotes, which is essentially a non-binding underwriting quote, and another one on intelligent document processing in our retirement business, we saw processing times just by moving these to Akka come down processing times got between 30 and 50% faster. That's the same prompts, okay? So same prompts, same accuracy, 30 and 50% faster. And in terms of concurrency, we saw up to 300% more concurrency. So 50% faster at the individual transaction level and 300% more concurrency. So the first thing we did is we made a decision to move to this platform. The second thing we did is we made a decision to stop throwing the biggest hammer, being an LLM, at every problem, and to start getting serious about fine-tuning open source small language models where we can adjust the weights and where we can get much more tailored. So that's the second thing in our cost governance program. And then the third thing is we just need much better hygiene. We need to understand detailed costs at the individual transaction level. We need to know where the costs are leaking, whether it's token costs, whether it's infra costs associated with APIs, whether it's infra costs associated with other types of integration. We need a lot more transparency on this information for the business at the individual transaction level so we can make the appropriate adjustments.
There's a fourth pillar that they're actually doing. She's just not commenting on it, which is you have to worry about high availability and reliability of these systems because the agentic systems, when they get into these workflows of automation, they're long running, and when they have a failure moment, you oftentimes have to restart. And so that's wasted tokens, and the token waste is pretty significant. And so you have the approach that you tackle for this. There's a bunch of techniques, but it gets into durable execution with a lot of replays, and you can eliminate that unnecessary waste on the failure modes. And the failure modes are very frequent. It's not once in a lifetime. It's often.
Okay. Well, we are out of time, but I want to bring it back to what I think if there needs to be a mindset shift for leaders out there. Would it be fair to say it's go slow to go fast? Do you like that one, or do you want to say something else? What do you think would be a mindset shift?
I mean, I love that phrase, but I mean, I think the big thing, my takeaway from the last couple of months has been you have to start reimagining the workforce to be AI first. I mean, that is probably the most important thing, and
okay.
I think that is the biggest impact you can have right now.
All right.
He said it perfectly.
All right, Jodie Wallis with Manulife and Tyler Jewell with Akka. Thank you both
Thank you
very
much.
Wonderful.